Fools are certain, the wise are always full of doubt. If someone declares they know precisely what is happening in this world, would you trust them, or would you be wary? In an age where everything can be found with a single click, why do we find ourselves lost amidst an ocean of definitive statements? Why is it that the more people shout, "I know the truth," the more fragile, scarred, and opaque truth itself seems to become? Could it be that the very act of believing we know is stopping us from learning? And is this certainty, which we imagine to be the pinnacle of knowledge, actually a collective sleepwalk leading us astray from reality? This book doesn't begin with a promise, it begins with a doubt. And if you have the patience to ponder with me, perhaps that doubt is the first sign that you are still free. Now, let's begin my summary of this book. Part 1, The Illusion of Science. I once believed that if we provided enough data, presented sufficient evidence, and thoroughly explained what science had achieved, the world would gradually become enlightened. I was wrong. Truth isn't scarce out there, truth is everywhere. And precisely because of that, it's being twisted, manipulated, exploited like fuel for media, for commerce, for power. People don't reject science, they dress up the most absurd, irrational, and misleading things in scientific garb. And then others believe. Have you ever seen a cell-frequency boosting drink? A cream that activates quantum microwaves? Or a yoga guru claiming to be a student of quantum mechanics? I've seen it not once, but hundreds of times. I call it fake science, or more precisely, the illusion of science. What I want to tell you isn't a dry lecture on how to spot fake news. What I want you to understand is asterisk why people believe these things, why we, as rational beings, so easily fall into illusions created by knowledge itself. And before I lead you into the labyrinth of quantum remedies, conspiracy vaccines, and miracle foods, let me tell you about a necklace. This necklace was sold online under the name Pendant. The seller advertised it as being able to protect you from electronic waves, block 5G effects, and boost bioenergy. It looked like nothing more than a mundane piece of metal, but it cost almost 3 million dong. Then, the radiation watchdog in the Netherlands discovered that the necklace emitted radiation. Seriously. The radiation levels were low but continuous, enough to harm the wearer if worn for prolonged periods. Something sold to protect health was, in fact, poisoning you. If that isn't the height of irony, I don't know what is. We are living in an era where scientific concepts are twisted like pretzels. Quantum is no longer a branch of physics dedicated to studying subatomic particles. It's a brand name for everything: yoga, massage, sex, drinking water, even emotions. The harder to understand, the more mysterious, the easier it sells. I once asked a friend, a physics professor who had taught quantum mechanics for over 20 years, if he had ever seen a consumer product that correctly used the concept of quantum. He answered immediately, without hesitation, "Never." And I suspect I never will. Because quantum, in the eyes of marketers, doesn't need to mean anything. It just needs to asterisk sound like it means something. And that's the nature of illusion. It doesn't need to be true, it just needs to look true. And it doesn't stop there. Did you know that in the past, people used to sell radioactive bread, radium mouthwash, and even atomic energy condoms? People once drank radium-infused water, believing it would grant eternal youth and boost vitality, until they died from their jawbones rotting away. A gentleman named Ebens, who drank over 1,400 bottles of radium water, died with his face completely disfigured. The headline about his death screamed, "The radioactive water worked fine until his jaw fell off." We were once that insane, and if you look closely, we still haven't fully woken up. Today, we no longer drink radioactive water, but we drink ionized alkaline water, believing it detoxifies us. We pay to inject stem cells from Swiss apples into our faces. We are ready to place our faith in things that are more vague, seem more professional, are harder to understand, and thus appear more true. This isn't just a problem for science. It's a problem for the entire ecosystem of knowledge, where even proof can be commissioned for a fee. Do you need a study to prove that massaging with a live chicken cures cancer? Someone will write it for you. Do you need an international journal to publish an article calling urine a panacea? I once tried submitting a research paper to such a journal. The title was "Homeopathy is Anti-Scientific Nonsense," and the content inside was just that one sentence, repeated in every section, from the introduction to the conclusion. The journal responded very quickly. We are delighted to inform you that your article has received preliminary approval. Please submit the final version as soon as possible. I sent back the exact same draft. They still nodded, only rejecting it when they realized the article was too short, not because of the content, not because of a lack of data, but because the format was incomplete. If you're not angry, then you probably haven't grasped the consequences. Because when these falsities infiltrate the academic system, they don't just stay there. They creep into Google Scholar and PubMed, into reviews, medical reports, into the hands of misguided doctors, into national health policies, and eventually into your own life through pills, detox teas, rejuvenation injections, and 5-star reviews from non-existent people. We, who are searching for the truth, are led astray by things that look like the truth. And that is the biggest crisis. Truth doesn't disappear. It gets diluted, colored, and overwhelmed by countless identical-looking but hollow copies. I know what you're thinking, so what's the solution? What can serve as a compass in a world where every compass can be magnetized by falsehoods? I wasn't sure either, until I returned to something old-fashioned, outdated, complex, and full of flaws. But still, the only thing we have, real science. Not the science of propaganda articles, but science in its true nature. Cautious, humble, failing, then correcting its mistakes. Real science isn't glamorous. It doesn't sell products, it doesn't promise miracles, it only offers one thing, a step-by-step approach to truth. And if we don't protect that candle from the storm of modern media, sooner or later, darkness will prevail. When I recounted the story about the homeopathy is nonsense article, many people burst out laughing. They thought I was joking, but I wasn't, and I wasn't laughing. Because out there, hundreds of thousands of similar articles are published every year, not just by eccentrics, but by PhDs teaching in state-funded institutions. They write to get promoted, to secure funding, to be invited to international conferences. They write because this profession rewards them by the number of citations, regardless of the content. I call this zombie science, studies that have been refuted, retracted, and proven false, yet are still cited, shared, and regarded as evidence. Sound familiar? If you've ever heard someone say vaccines cause autism, you're looking at a zombie walking amongst us. It began with a 1998 study by Andrew Wakefield, a British doctor, published in The Lancet, one of the most prestigious medical journals. Wakefield studied only 12 children with no control group, no clear scientific methodology, yet he concluded that the MMR vaccine could cause autism. The scientific community reacted immediately, but the media did not. Newspapers jumped in, celebrities jumped in. Oprah invited Jenny McCarthy on air. This person asserted, "My child has autism because of vaccines." The story spread like wildfire. And even though that study was later retracted, Wakefield was stripped of his medical license, and hundreds of major studies proved no link between vaccines and autism that zombie lives on. Why? Because belief doesn't need evidence. It needs an emotional story. And that zombie managed to bite many people. I used to think only conspiracy theorists were susceptible, but I've seen doctors, pharmacists, therapists, intelligent people still cite Wakefield's paper. They quote it as if it had never been retracted. They even use it to prove that academia is being manipulated, that Wakefield is a modern-day Galileo. That's right, comparing Wakefield to Galileo. This is a common tactic, a gish gallop, if you will, used by those who spread misinformation when challenged. They don't respond with evidence. They say, Galileo was also dismissed by the whole world, wasn't he? Sounds plausible, doesn't it? It's a deflection. Galileo was condemned by the Catholic Church, but he had data, observations, and logical reasoning. Wakefield, he had a group of lawyers funding his research to sue pharmaceutical companies. He altered data in his study. He violated medical research ethics. He created a global panic. Such a comparison is an insult to Galileo. But why do people like Wakefield survive for so long? I think partly because they know how to tap into emotions, and partly because we ourselves have helped them. We, the scientific community, have created a giant hype machine. I once attended a conference on human genome sequencing. A professor leaned over and whispered to me, "Don't criticize this field, or the money will flow into stem cell research." You see, that's how academia works. Every field has to inflate its own importance, promising breakthroughs, ushering in new eras, revolutionizing treatments. Without hyperbolic language, there's no funding. And when universities start issuing press releases about new discoveries that will change medicine, journalists grab the headlines, politicians seize the slogans, entrepreneurs pick up the ideas, and consumers snatch up hope. The result is that the entire ecosystem of knowledge slides into a mire of illusion, where everything is a breakthrough, every discovery a revolution, every study the final proof. But do you know the truth? Over 90% of clinical trials fail. An animal study rarely translates into human application. The things you hear on medical news today will most likely not materialize, or if they do, it will take 10, 20 years, and the final results will be only a tiny fraction of the initial promises. But who cares? Who has time to wait for the truth? Nobody. People want certainty right now. And so, certainty, or rather, the illusion of certainty, becomes an immensely valuable commodity. We buy it every day, in immune-boosting pills, in detox water bottles, in clean, organic, GMO-free menus, in articles promising 10 ways to extend your life, in podcasts claiming positive thinking changes your DNA. We crave the feeling of I know the right thing. Even if it's the wrong thing, I don't blame you, I was once like that too. But then I began to realize this world doesn't lack information. What we lack is a filter, the skill to doubt, the ability to say, I'm not sure yet. And that is the most dangerous thing about this era. We no longer tolerate uncertainty. We've forgotten a simple truth. Science is not the truth. Science is the asterisk process of getting closer to the truth through failure, skepticism, retesting, and humility. And if you're looking for absolute certainty, I'm sorry, I don't have it. But I have something else. I have a candle that Carl Sagan called a light in the darkness. It's weak, flickering, easily extinguished, but it's still the only thing powerful enough to guide the way. And I'll tell you how to keep it from going out. I once invited to speak at a health communications workshop. The discussion that day was lively, the audience enthusiastic. But when I mentioned that absolute certainty doesn't exist in science, the room fell silent. A woman stood up, her eyes bright, her voice taut as a steel wire. So, you're saying we can't believe anything? That question stayed with me for a long time because it wasn't ordinary anger. It was a thirst. A thirst to believe, to feel reassured, to hold onto something tangible in a world full of ambiguity. Deep down, I didn't blame her. I understood. I myself had once searched for certainty. And precisely because I understood, I felt an even greater responsibility to say something that wasn't easy to hear. That certainty is an illusion, and those who sell illusions never lack customers. Have you seen machines that diagnose water levels in cells, or devices that measure the vibrational energy index of food, or bracelets that restructure DNA? These products all have something in common: scientific-sounding names, highly professional presentations, and absolutely no real basis. Out of curiosity, I once tried such a machine. It promised to measure intrinsic energy. The staff asked me to place my hand on a metal plate and look at a computer screen. After a few minutes, the results appeared. I was deficient in quantum elements and needed to supplement with harmonizing vitamins. You guessed it, there's no such thing as quantum elements, nor has anyone ever proven the effects of harmonizing vitamins. But they still sell, still advertise, still have customers. What worries me most is that many people buy not because they are foolish. They buy because they have lost faith in the mainstream system. They visited doctors who didn't explain things, taken medications that didn't work, heard rumors that no one corrected. And so, they turn to something new, something natural, something that seems more humanistic. When real science becomes distant, mechanistic, and cold, fake science slips in like a comforter. It doesn't say, "We're not sure yet." It says, "I have the answer for you, and only for you." And that personalized promise is the true magic. I once read an advertisement for a nutritional DNA test service. It promised that from your genes, they would identify ideal foods, optimal eating times, and suitable exercises. But when I tracked down the research behind it, I found that most of it was superficial or not robust enough to draw such recommendations. I asked a genetics expert, "So, do those kinds of gene tests mean anything?" He said yes, on the condition that you use them as a tiny piece of the overall health puzzle, not as a map of destiny. The problem is, consumers don't think that way. They treat the results as gospel. They stop eating fish because of a low omega-3 metabolism gene. They do HIIT every morning because their genes respond well to high intensity. they take expensive supplements because their genes lack enzyme ABC. And so, data doesn't make us wiser. It makes us asterisk think we understand ourselves, but in reality, we're being led around like puppets. I call that the illusion of self-understanding. In this era, understanding has become a luxury brand. Everyone wants to personalize their lifestyle, optimize themselves, become an expert. And like any luxury item, the rarer, the more expensive, the more vague, the more sought after it becomes. The irony is that truth isn't that appealing. It's not flashy, not personalized, and it doesn't tell you what you want to hear. Truth tells us there are things we don't know, that very small genetic factors don't determine everything, that some recommendations lack enough data for widespread application. And there are things we'll only understand clearly in another 10 years. But who wants to hear these things? Who likes humility? The answer is very few people. Unless we learn anew, learn to live with ambiguity. I know it's not easy. I spent years getting comfortable with the feeling of uncertainty. It's like walking through a desert without a map, with only a compass. And the strange thing is, only when I stopped searching for a straight path did I begin to find true direction. You might ask, how do you live with uncertainty? I don't have a formula, but I have a few anchors. Small, fragile, but honest anchors. 1, don't believe things that sound too good to be true. 2, be skeptical of what you want to believe. 3, prioritize those who dare to say, I'm not clear yet. And 4, learn to ask questions not to win, but to understand. Because ultimately, the goal isn't to be the smartest person, the goal is to be wisely less certain. And trust me, sometimes a well-placed question mark is more powerful than any assertion. There's a psychological phenomenon I think you should know about, because it affects almost everything you've ever believed to be true. The Dunning-Kruger effect, simply put, is this paradox. Those who know little often believe they know a lot, while those who know much often doubt themselves. I once participated in a TV discussion with a man who introduced himself as a natural medicine expert. He said directly to my face, vaccines are ineffective, only the natural immune system can defeat disease. I tried to respond with data, citing research, quoting statistics from the WHO. He just smirked and declared, I've read all the research. I am certain I am right. At that moment, I realized I couldn't win, not because he was right, but because he was too certain. The less people are exposed to the real academic world, the more easily they are tempted by oversimplification. They don't know the layers of overlapping complexity, the contradictions, the error margins, the validations, the retractions. They only see the surface, and the surface always appears certain. A saying I love is, if you think you understand a complex problem thoroughly, it proves you haven't understood it yet. It sounds paradoxical, but that is the maturity of scientific thinking. Maturity doesn't come from answers, but from the right questions. And we are living in an age where answers are abundant, but questions are rare. I once witnessed a workshop on DNA energy healing therapy. The instructor presented a molecular energy field diagram describing how to activate dormant genes with chanting. She drew a circle on the board and divided it with a ruler into regions: ancestral energy, cellular energy, planetary energy. Each region had a corresponding essential oil. It sounds ridiculous, but the attendees weren't laughing. They were nodding, taking notes, impressed. I'm not telling this story to mock them. I'm telling it because I was once one of those sitting there. Not in that specific session, but in many others where I too wanted to believe. I once took natural hormone balancing pills. I once meditated to mobilize quantum frequencies. I used to think, what if they're right? And I understand why it was so appealing. Because it's easy to understand. It packages the whole world into a few simple models. It gives us a sense of control, and above all, it gives us a role. The person who knows, the one who holds the secret. But the world isn't that simple. And when we believe we understand everything, that's precisely when we are most easily deceived. I once interviewed a doctor who had fallen into the alternative knowledge spiral. He recounted that initially, simply tired of the public health system, he delved into traditional medicine, then macrobiotics, then enzyme therapy. From exploring, he transitioned to being absolutely certain. He quit his job, opened a natural clinic. It was only when one of his cancer patients died after 8 months of only drinking vegetable juice and solar energy that he began to awaken. What moved me was not the patient's tragedy, but the last sentence he said, I didn't intend to kill anyone. I was just too certain about something I didn't understand. That certainty kills people, and that's why I call it the most dangerous illusion of this era. We need to relearn how to doubt, not a paralyzing doubt, but an active, productive doubt, the kind of doubt that makes us dig deeper, verify, and pause before jumping in. I once stood among a group of nutrition students. I asked, "How many of you have ever read a complete original scientific study?" Only 2 hands went up. I then asked, "How many of you have shared a health article after only reading the headline?" Nearly everyone. We don't have the habit of going to the source. We live by sharing opinions, sharing emotions, sharing certainty. But most of what is shared doesn't come from understanding, but from emotional intuition. And in the world of social media, emotional intuition has a higher virality than any data. That reminds me of research on the spread of misinformation on Twitter. This study showed that fake news spread 6 times faster than real news. Why? Because it's often shorter, more surprising, and more asterisk. Fake news doesn't use words like could, seems, requires further research. It says, "This is the truth," and our brains, being inherently lazy, love definitive statements. Therefore, to combat the illusion of knowledge, we must learn to live with ambiguity, get used to saying, "I don't know," and accept the discomfort of not having clear conclusions. I used to hate that feeling, but now I see it as a sign that I'm on the right track. Because if I'm not confused, it means I've fallen into some assumption. And unverified assumptions are the root of all illusions. I have a rather peculiar habit. I collect the most outlandish claims I've seen in health advertisements. One of my favorites is, "Stem cells from Swiss apples can reverse the aging process at the DNA level." That sentence perfectly encapsulates all the elements of scientific illusion: a touch of Europe, a dash of genetic jargon, a promise beyond verification, and absolutely no real evidence behind it. We aren't just led by certainty, we're addicted to it. Certainty gives us a sense of control, a feeling of knowing what we're doing, of not being left behind. And in a world where everything moves so fast, from technology and economics to the weather, that feeling is more valuable than gold. You might ask, so what's different about real science? Science also makes claims. I don't deny that. But what makes science different isn't that it's always right, but that it accepts it can be wrong. The difference isn't in the declaration, but in the reaction when that declaration is challenged. Real science has mechanisms for self-correction. It accepts article retractions. It changes research directions. It dissects itself. Fake science does not. It avoids real debate. It prevaricates, labels itself as oppressed, silenced, and resorts to global conspiracies whenever challenged. And then it uses that very opposition as proof of a hidden truth. I once debated someone who believed 5G causes brain cancer. I presented evidence from dozens of independent studies. He said, "That's precisely why I don't believe it. Those studies are all controlled." I understood then that debating someone so certain was pointless, because they were no longer seeking truth, they were protecting a part of their identity. That's why the illusion of knowledge isn't just an information problem, it's a personal identity problem. When you believe something for long enough, especially if it makes you feel unique, especially prominent, you no longer see it as an opinion. You see it as part of who you are, and anyone who challenges that opinion is challenging you. That's why I'm not writing this to win a logical battle. I'm writing to stir you, the reader, who is navigating a maze of academic jargon, media, and social networks, where falsehoods and truths are intermingled. I want you to realize that we don't need to be certain to live correctly. On the contrary, it's precisely when we embrace uncertainty that we have the chance to live more authentically. You don't need to have an opinion on everything. You don't have to be an expert in every field. You're allowed to say, "I'm not clear." You have the right to wait for more data, and above all, you have the right to change your mind when new evidence emerges. That's not weakness, that's courage. Because in a world where everyone screams assertions, the one who knows how to listen, to hesitate, to ask questions, is the bravest. I don't intend to turn you into a scientist. I don't expect you to scour every research paper. But I do hope that from now on, you'll be more hesitant whenever someone promises something too cert, too appealing, too perfectly aligned with what you want to hear. I hope you learn to say, "I'll look into it further," or "I'm not sure, can you cite your sources?" And if you can do that, even just once a day, you've pushed back the darkness of illusion a little more. We don't need more people who are cert. We need more people who are honest about their uncertainty. Because from that uncertainty, we truly begin to learn, and from there, step out of illusion to move towards a deeper, kinder, and more humble understanding. Part 2. The Illusion of Goodness asterisk. I once thought the most dangerous thing in medicine was ignorance, but then I realized there was something even more perilous: misplaced kindness. No one wakes up in the morning thinking, "Today I'm going to do something evil." Even those who sell worthless products, promote extreme diets, or spread false health beliefs don't think they're bad people. On the contrary, they believe they're saving the world. And that's the problem. You won't be easily fooled by a thief, but you'll open your heart, listen, and follow someone who believes they are doing good. Think about the phrase clean living. It sounds so good. Who wouldn't want to live clean? But when that concept is hijacked, oversimplified, and turned into a marketing slogan, it becomes a weapon. I once stood in front of a food aisle at the supermarket and saw a label that said chemical-free. A woman next to me turned and said, "I only buy chemical-free products. Everything else is poison." I smiled and asked, "So, you don't drink water?" She frowned. I said, "Water is a chemical compound, and so is the oxygen you breathe. Your whole life you've lived with chemicals." She was silent, then turned away without answering. A small story, but it reflects something much larger. We are blinded by moralized language. When something is labeled natural, organic, original, environmentally friendly, we instinctively assume it's good. When a product is labeled artificial, GMO, synthetic, researched by Big Pharma, we instinctively assume it's bad. But reality is far more complex. A natural vegetable can contain hundreds of pathogenic microorganisms. A synthetic preservative can save millions from food poisoning. A genetically modified food could prevent starvation for an entire region. Yet, just label it GMO, and people avoid it like the plague. And the worst part is, companies know this. I once approached a product development team at a famous beverage company. They told me, consumers don't want the truth, they want to feel asterisk good, so we put natural on the label, even if the product has gone through 12 processing steps. That's the beginning of the illusion of goodness. We no longer choose based on data. We choose to feel like we're living right. Buying an anti-aging cream extracted from Edelweiss, feeling kind to yourself. Skipping vaccines because I choose natural. Feeling kind to your body. Taking your child to a bioenergy healer, feeling kind to your child. None of these people intend to harm anyone. They only want the best. But when kindness is merely a feeling not grounded in truth, the consequences can be unpredictable. I once knew a family who refused chemotherapy for their daughter with cancer because they followed a spiritual nutritionist. The girl died 3 months later. Her father wept, saying, "I thought I was doing the right thing." I cannot blame him, but I also cannot remain silent. Because if we don't dare to name these illusions of goodness, we are letting them lead others to error. In my talks, I often show a picture of a detox drink bottle and ask, "What is this selling?" People answer, "Cleanliness, purification, health." No one answers, "Fear." But fear is precisely the real product. Detox doesn't sell juice. It sells the fear that your body is dirty, full of toxins, and needs cleansing. And when you're afraid, you easily spend money. I know some people say, drinking juice can't hurt anyway. But if you believe that only juice can clean you, and your body, your liver, kidneys, intestines is helpless, then you've lost faith in your own fundamental physiology. You are abandoning real knowledge to chase a moral illusion. I'm not saying you shouldn't eat clean or live green. I'm saying don't let a good feeling blind you. I once received an email from a woman. She recounted how she tried to detox her body by drinking only spicy lemon water for 10 days. On the 8th day, she fainted in the bathroom. When she woke up, the first thing she thought was, "Are the toxins coming out?" Do you see what's happening? When you believe in a moral illusion, you'll interpret even danger as a sign of progress. I call it stubborn belief wrapped in goodwill. It causes people not only to reject modern medicine, but to actively fight against it. It leads parents to refuse vaccination, cancer patients to abandon treatment, and healthy individuals to use unproven therapies. Then, when illness strikes, there's no way to save them. These are not harmless personal choices. These are dangerous beliefs disguised as kindness. I used to think people who rejected mainstream medicine were a minority, fringe individuals' oddities. But then I began to realize they are everywhere. In my neighborhood, at my child's school, even within the medical profession itself, where some doctors, pharmacists, and nurses are starting to talk about bioenergy enhancement and holistic nutritional therapies to cure diabetes. I met a well-trained cardiologist who told me, I no longer believe in statin drugs. I find oregano oil more effective. I asked, based on what research? He replied, no research needed, I see my patients improving. Do you see what's happening? This is when personal intuition overrides objective evidence, and it's happening within professional circles, not just among ordinary people. What's the reason? Because when you believe you're doing something good, you believe you don't need evidence. You see a patient improve, and therefore you must be right regardless of the placebo effect, regardless of variables, regardless of what science says. And if anyone dares to doubt them, they'll be labeled mechanistic, inhumane, beholden to the pharmaceutical industry. I once wrote an article criticizing the trend of extreme clean eating, where people completely eliminate gluten, dairy, carbs, and animal protein without any medical reason. The article received hundreds of furious responses. One person wrote, "You are a puppet of the food industry. People like you are making the world sick." I read it and found it ironic, not because I was attacked, but because I saw the lurking fear behind it. The fear of being poisoned, the fear of being misled, the fear of losing control. And with that fear, people will do anything as long as they feel like they are controlling something. So they start eliminating foods themselves, setting strict dietary rules, excluding every small item because it's heard to cause inflammation, counting every pH, every D index, every ingredient label. At first, it's just concern, then it's control, and finally, it becomes an obsession. I once met a woman suffering from orthorexia, a rare but increasingly common eating disorder, obsessed with eating right and clean. She ate nothing with sugar, flour, oil, or salt-only organic vegetables, sprouted rice, and alkaline water. She believed she was living healthily. Her body was emaciated, her skin sallow, her hair falling out, she had lost her period. Yet she said, "I feel purer than ever." Purer asterisk. Do you realize? Eating is no longer about physiology, it has become an ethics lesson. The one who eats right is good. The one who eats wrong is inferior. And from that, an unspoken society forms where food becomes a moral badge, where every item you choose reflects your personal worth. The problem, these badges often have no real medical value. I don't oppose healthy eating, but when healthy becomes extreme, it's no longer science, it's dogma. And dogma never tolerates debate. I once participated in an online forum about natural parenting. A member asked, "My child has a 40-degree fever. What should I do?" Dozens of answers poured in, not one saying, "Go to the doctor." They advised giving the child warm ginger water, crushed mint leaves, chanting a fever-reducing spell. Don't use medicine, it will destroy the child's immune system. I couldn't stay silent. I commented, "Please take the child to the emergency room. 40 degrees can cause seizures, brain damage." Guess what the response was? "Get out, you hospital shill, you're spreading fear, doctors are inhumane." I was expelled from the group within 10 minutes. And the child, I don't know. I only know that death doesn't care if you're kind or not. It comes when you act incorrectly, no matter how good your intentions. That's why I'm writing this section not to attack vegetarians, environmentalists, or nature lovers, but to say that if your kindness isn't accompanied by truth, it can cause more harm than even malice. I once believed that good intentions couldn't be wrong. Now I know that blind faith is the most deeply damaging thing, precisely because it's wrapped in a humanitarian facade. And if you truly want to live kindly, you need to start with the honesty that you might be wrong. I once spoke with a friend who works in media. She was in charge of a campaign promoting a liver detox supplement. I asked, "So, does the product actually work?" She shook her head and chuckled. "What matters is that it looks asterisk real. Customers like the feeling that they're doing something good for their body." That sentence haunted me for a long time. The feeling. What people are buying isn't a biological function. It's the sensation of doing the right thing, loving themselves, taking care of their health. That feeling is so powerful it completely obscures reality, that there's no evidence the product detoxifies the liver. In fact, if you have a healthy liver, your body already does that every day without assistance. We are living in an era where morality has become a consumable experience. I once walked through an upscale supermarket where happy chicken eggs were displayed. their cartons adorned with images of chickens in straw hats strolling through meadows. Part of me wanted to believe that story, but another part, the sober part, asked myself, do I know anything about that farm? Is there any verification? Or is it just a cute image to make me feel less guilty? That's a form of easily digestible morality. You don't need to change your lifestyle. You just need to buy the right product and presto asterisk, you're good. Everything is moralized. A bottle of nut milk is no longer just food, it's a statement. A pair of sustainable shoes is no longer a fashion choice, it's absolution for the fast fashion shirt you bought yesterday. I'm not saying this to mock. I used to be like that too. I once spent 5 times the usual price on chemical-free mouthwash, only to realize its main ingredient was alcohol, just like every other mouthwash. But the feeling was very real. The feeling that I was living consciously. The feeling that I was better than those who weren't conscious. And then I began to realize something frightening. We are using consumer choices as a moral yardstick. What you eat, what you wear, what you buy, whether you choose vaccines or not, natural birth or C-section, breastfeeding or formula feeding. Every personal decision is now judged through a moral lens. Are you a good person? And in that process, something crucial is lost: empathy. I once attended a vegan conference. The speaker on stage criticized meat eaters as heartless destroyers of the planet. I looked around. A few people quietly retreated from the room. Perhaps they ate meat because they grew up in such a culture. Perhaps they didn't have access to other foods. Perhaps they had medical reasons. But to that speaker, they were bad people, simply because they didn't choose as he did. That's the turning point for every moralizing movement, when kindness becomes a measure of superiority, when you no longer want to persuade others, but to win. I once heard a mother recount how she was excluded from her child's school's parent group because she didn't put her child on an absolute clean eating regimen. They didn't want their children sitting next to a child who ate gluten. This is no longer a health choice, it's a new religion. A religion without deities, but with rituals, doctrines, and even punishments for heretics. We are replacing the complexity of science with the simplicity of ethics. Science says, we're not sure yet. Ethics says, I am certain this is the right thing. And when that right thing is personalized, this is asterisk my asterisk choice, don't judge then any counterargument is seen as an attack. I once faced fierce backlash when I questioned a macrobiotic diet regimen for cancer. I wasn't attacking the patient, I was simply asking if there was any evidence. But the response I received was, how dare you insult my choice? This is my faith. Do you see? When health becomes faith, we are no longer talking about life, we are talking about identity. And identity is not easily persuaded by data. I know that for many, these choices are their whole world. But I also know that if we don't dare to separate ethics from data, we are letting emotions guide us in moments that demand the most rationality. And when matters of life and death, health, medicine, and the environment are turned into a moral performance, we forget the most fundamental truth. The right thing doesn't always make you asterisk feel asterisk good. There are painful choices, harsh treatments, and data that goes against our emotions. But if we dare to look straight, we will realize that truth doesn't come to comfort. It comes to save lives. I once stood before a class of medical students and asked them a seemingly simple question. Do you think organic food is always better? Almost all of them raised their hands. Some nodded, others even looked at me as if I had asked something foolish. Then I projected onto the screen a comprehensive study from dozens of clinical trials. There is no strong evidence that organic food has a higher nutritional value than conventional food. And when properly washed, pesticide residue levels do not exceed safety standards. Some organic vegetables even have a higher risk of bacterial contamination because antibiotics are not used for control. The room fell silent. Then a student stood up and said, but organic food feels safer, asterisk feels. I don't deny the feeling. I also like to feel safe, to think I'm taking good care of myself. But if truth is reduced to something that spoils a feeling, then we have chosen to abandon science to live in the comfort of belief. And nothing is more dangerous than belief wrapped in a moral facade. You can see it everywhere, in pitches for non-toxic natural health products, in sound healing retreats, among extreme vegans who say giving children milk is a crime, in mothers who refuse antibiotics for their children because they want the body to fight it off naturally. I once spoke with such a mother. Her child had severe tonsillitis, a high fever, and hadn't eaten or drunk anything for 2 days. The doctor prescribed antibiotics, but she refused. She said, "I don't want to harm my child's gut microbiome. I believe in the body's self-healing ability." I asked, "Do you think if left untreated, your child could suffer complications?" She looked at me as if I had just insulted her faith. "I love my child and I know what's best for them." I don't doubt that, love, but love cannot replace data, and blind faith, even if rooted in love, can kill. Do you see the paradox? We love so much that we defy truth. We are so kind that we reject truth. We believe so strongly in what's good for you that we are willing to be blind. And that's why I believe the illusion of goodness isn't just a personal mistake, it's a societal threat. Look at the anti-vaccine wave, where parents don't vaccinate their own children but still send them to public schools, where other children rely on herd immunity to survive. They don't see this as selfishness, they see it as courage, as standing up for a natural choice. That word, courage, chokes me. I once wrote an article pointing out that vaccine refusal decisions in highly educated communities were causing outbreaks of measles, whooping cough, and even diphtheria. A reader responded, "We are not selfish. We just refuse to be collectively poisoned." They genuinely believe they are protecting their children. They believe they are doing the right thing. And that's precisely what makes them unshakable. Because you cannot use logic to dismantle a belief that was not formed by logic. You can only tell stories that make them feel, make them see that other well-meaning people have also been misled by the illusion of morality. Another parent told me the story of her son who got mild tetanus from a rusty nail scratch on his foot. She refused the tetanus vaccine, believing his body could heal itself. 3 days later, the boy started convulsing, struggling to breathe. She recounted, "I prayed. I sat by his bed, held his hand, and believed he would overcome it." Doctors had to forcibly administer antitoxin. The boy survived, but when I asked, "Did you change your mind about vaccines?" she replied, "No." I think that was just an exception. Do you see what's happening? When experience brushes with tragedy, belief still doesn't change. Because that belief isn't just theory, it's part of identity, a part of personal morality. We're no longer debating medicine, we're discussing religious conviction. The only difference is that the deities here are named natural, pure, clean, intuition. And sadly, the world encourages this moralization. Social media rewards extremist voices, media loves breakthrough claims that change everything. Companies exploit the feeling of conscious living to sell more products. Politicians avoid confronting anti-vaxxers to secure votes. Meanwhile, science, with its humble, hesitant, headline-unworthy voice, retreats into the background. Do you see the paradox? We are living in an era of abundant morality but scarce truth. And if you are truly a kind person, start by accepting that kindness does not exempt you from verification. I once received an email from a stranger. The content was just one line. "I hope you know you are killing the hope of those who still believe in what is right." I read that sentence over and over, not because I was offended, but because I realized something. For many people, hope and truth no longer reside on the same side. If you force them to choose, they will choose hope, even if that hope is based on illusion. And the most powerful illusion is believing that you are doing the right thing, that you live kindly, that you are awakened, that you know something others don't. That very belief gives you the power to do crazy things and believe you are saving the world. I once met a group of people advocating for lotus birth, which means leaving the umbilical cord attached to the placenta until it naturally detaches. Even though this significantly increases the risk of serious infection, they called it birth without violence. I asked if they had any evidence. They replied, "No need. This is primal, natural, pure, natural, pure." These words are repeated like mantras in every feel-good trend. And then I wondered, when did natural become synonymous with good? Dengue fever is natural, cancer is natural, coronavirus is natural. And precisely because of that, medicine, the unnatural thing, is what saves millions from natural death. But in an ambiguous world, the word natural becomes a charm. Just attach that label to a product, an idea, an action, and people immediately drop their guard. A cosmetic brand was found to be using irritating chemicals. Their response was to launch a new line, completely organic. No parabens, sulfates, no science. No science, I'm not kidding, that was the actual slogan. Skin. When I recounted this at a conference, the audience burst out laughing, but that laughter quickly died down when I continued. And that product line is outselling reputable brands by 3 times. Why? Because it's not selling a product, it's selling a feeling of moral reassurance. A writer once wrote, "People don't need the truth, they need stories that make them feel like good people." That statement might be satirical, but it's true. And if you are a storyteller, a spokesperson, a content creator like me, you must ask a question. Are you serving the truth, or are you nurturing an illusion? I no longer hope for this world to return to an era of pure rationality. That's unrealistic. But I believe we can recognize when we are being drawn in by moral illusions. And from that moment, we can begin to resist not with anger, but with kind skepticism. You don't need to stop eating clean. You just need to know why you're doing it and understand that true cleanliness isn't in a label, but in how you think. You don't need to abandon a natural lifestyle. You just need to understand that natural doesn't mean safe, and artificial doesn't mean toxic. You don't need to stop loving your child. You just need to be brave enough to admit that love doesn't exempt you from mistakes, unless you allow truth to illuminate that love. I once met a mother who completely changed her perspective after her child nearly died from abandoning pneumonia treatment. She didn't turn to disparaging traditional medicine. She didn't declare she had been deceived. She simply said, "I let the feeling of being right overshadow my ability to ask myself if I truly was right." That statement, to me, is the perfect definition of moral maturity. Because ultimately, kindness isn't a feeling, it's an action guided by truth. Even when that truth isn't comfortable. I know you might be reading this and asking, so who do I trust? Everything seems deceptive. I'm not telling you to trust me. I don't have the answers. I just want you to keep one habit. Doubt anything that makes you feel like a good person too easily. Because the truly right thing often comes with discomfort, hesitation, and the admission that we are imperfect. And it is precisely in that imperfection that we can learn, change, and truly become better. Not in the eyes of others, but in the cold, yet sincere light of truth. Part 3, the illusion of personal opinion. Something peculiar is happening on social media. Everyone has an opinion about everything from politics, vaccines, education, nutrition, and war, to things that seemingly have nothing to do with them, like the operating mechanisms of nuclear reactors or the monetary policy of the U.S. Federal Reserve. They don't just have opinions, they are certain they are right. I'm not saying this is new. Humans have always had a tendency to judge, critique, and react, but never before in history have opinions been so empowered. No evidence needed, no training, no experience, just belief. And a social media account. I once read a tweet that said, "Children don't need 8 hours of sleep. Too much sleep hinders brain development." Over 20,000 likes. Hundreds of comments thanking the author for opening their minds. I looked up the author. Not a doctor, not a neuroscientist, but an essential oil seller. And what astonished me wasn't the ignorance, but the overflowing confidence. That confidence is the foundation of a new illusion, the illusion that personal opinions hold the same value as verified knowledge. A journalist once asked me, "What do you think about everyone having the right to speak up nowadays?" I replied, "That's wonderful. But the right to speak up doesn't mean every voice carries equal weight. A vaccine expert with decades of research cannot be placed on par with a self-proclaimed, awakened parent just because both post videos on TikTok. But algorithms don't care about expertise, they care about engagement. And engagement has a simple formula: short, shocking, emotional, extreme. You say, vaccines are effective, but we need to continue monitoring for variants and rare side effects. You get 12 likes. You say, Big Pharma is poisoning your children with vaccines. You get 120,000 likes. It's not because people are stupid. It's because they are tired, afraid, and craving a clear answer. Ambiguity confuses people. Certainty brings relief. And amidst a chaotic world, personal opinion seems to be the last refuge. I once debated someone who believed the Earth was flat. I presented models of satellite orbital mechanics, images from the ISS. He replied, "I'm not convinced. I feel the ground is flat." Feel, that's the key word in this era. Feelings are given a higher position than data, intuition is treated as truth, and opinion is elevated to unassailable personal knowledge. And when personal opinions are sacralized, any counterargument is seen as a personal attack. I once wrote an article analyzing common nutritional misconceptions. In it, I pointed out that gluten doesn't harm the majority of the population, and that sugar-free diets are often just marketing ploys. The response I received wasn't a debate about data, but rather, how dare you deny my experience? I eat gluten and get a headache. Who are you to think you understand my body better than I do? I wasn't denying her experience, but I know personal feelings can be wrong. Our bodies are affected by beliefs, habits, context, and psychology, not just food. And the feeling of "I feel better" isn't always a reliable indicator. Yet, anyone who dares to say that will be labeled arrogant, a mouthpiece expert, a denier of personalization. What we are witnessing is not the liberation of voices, but the drowning out of expert voices. You can be a professor who has researched artificial intelligence for 30 years, yet still be called an idiot by a popular TikToker with a million-view clip claiming AI makes children's brains shrink. And the saddest part is, the crowd cannot distinguish who truly knows from who is just performing. Because in a world where everyone speaks as if they know everything, the humble person appears less convincing. The expert says, "We need more data." The ignorant person says, "I'm certain it's true." The expert says, "It might be true in some circumstances." The ignorant person says, "Anyone who doesn't see this is blind." And so, the crowd turns to those who speak louder, more clearly, and align more with what they already believe. Truth loses in the competition for attention. One day, I received an invitation to participate in a live television debate. The topic was whether vaccination should be mandatory for students. I sat with an epidemiologist, a politician, a journalist, and an Instagram celebrity. She introduced herself as an awakened mother, with nearly 200,000 followers, specializing in sharing natural health solutions for the whole family. When it was her turn, she held her head high, eyes blazing. "I'm not a doctor, but I'm a mother, and no one understands my child better than me. I don't need data, I have intuition." The audience applauded. I wasn't surprised, I just felt pain. Because if intuition is the only measure by which to evaluate everything, then science has no place to exist. Data, experiments, statistics all become superfluous if a single "I feel" is enough to refute them. I don't deny the role of feelings. Intuition has value, but intuition cannot replace analysis, and opinion cannot replace evidence. Yet today, everything seems to be inverted. I see this in how social media platforms operate. Have you ever noticed? Most systems invite you to rate everything from products and services to doctors, teachers, schools, even vaccines. Why not? Everyone has the right to express themselves, and giving a rating becomes an act that gives a sense of power. I once read a 1-star review for a renowned pediatrician. The writer complained that he didn't smile kindly, didn't express clear emotions, and refused her suggestion to use coconut oil to treat her child's ear infection. To me, that's no reason for 1 star. But to that person, it was perfectly logical. Because they weren't rating expertise, they were rating a feeling, and feelings are always right in their world. We are living in an era where experience is personalized to the point of no longer being accountable to external reality. If you like it, it's good. If you feel offended, it's wrong. I call that the illusion of unassailable opinion. Because if everything is based on feeling, then no one is allowed to debate anymore. If I feel offended, then you are wrong, even if you didn't mean to. If I find a product good, then anyone who points out its harm is attacking me personally. You see this online every day. Posts refuting vaccines are reported as harmful. Articles exposing certain diets are accused of body shaming. Videos warning about the dangers of conspiracy theories are labeled as attempts to control others' opinions. We're not just suffering from information overload, we're in a crisis of being able to receive dissenting opinions. And when people live in opinion bubbles reinforced by algorithms that only show them what they already like and believe, then every time someone says something different, they don't hear a new voice, they hear an attack on their ego. A parent once messaged me after an article I wrote about how nut milk isn't necessarily better than cow's milk in all cases. She wrote, "I don't need you to tell me anything. My child drinks nut milk and is tall and healthy. And you, who are you?" I replied, "I'm not saying your child is unhealthy. I'm just saying if you avoid cow's milk because you believe it's toxic, then that's a misunderstanding." She didn't reply, because I had touched a taboo, questioning personal belief. When opinion is elevated to identity, any counterargument becomes an insult. And if you're thinking, Let them live their way. How does it affect me? I'll tell you directly, it does affect you. When too many people believe personal experience is paramount, we cannot build sensible public health policies. We cannot communicate scientific information. We cannot agree on what is true because everyone is right in their own way. And in that world, truth doesn't disappear, but it gets diluted, distorted, pushed to the margins by the noise of millions of egos clamoring to shout loudest. I'm not asking you to stop having opinions. I just hope you ask yourself one question before speaking. Am I saying this because I know or because I feel I know? That is the difference between a world that can learn and a world trapped in a self-affirming loop. I once thought the internet would save the world. As a student, I was excited by the promise that knowledge would be democratized. Everyone, regardless of wealth, nationality, or education, could access the troves of information once confined to university libraries or the minds of academics. I was wrong. The internet didn't make truth more universal. The internet made everything asterisk look asterisk like truth. I'm not saying you can't find good data online. Of course you can. But you can also find evidence that the moon is made of cheese, and you'll find a community of thousands who believe it. In that world, evidence is no longer a foundation. Evidence becomes a choice. You don't search to learn, you search to affirm what you already believe. I once did a small experiment. I typed "vaccines cause infertility" into Google. The results were hundreds of articles, videos, blogs, and Facebook posts with all-caps headlines touting secret evidence and buried research. But when I examined each source, most were misinformation, fake studies, miscontextualized citations. Some cited journals without peer review, where you could publish anything if you paid. The scary thing is that readers lack the skills to discern. They see scientific research with citations, many people sharing it, that's enough. A very intelligent friend once sent me an article about alkaline water curing cancer. I asked, "Did you read the whole article?" He admitted he hadn't, but the title sounded plausible. We no longer judge truth by evidence. We judge it by its palatability. If something sounds plausible, aligns with what we already believe, and is spoken by someone who seems like us, we believe it. And it's at this point that the illusion of personal opinion is reinforced by community. You believe vaccines are toxic? There's a community for you. You believe the sun gets cold at night? There's a podcast for you. You think sugar water cures COVID? There's a YouTube tutorial for you. It doesn't matter what you think. What matters is that you're not alone. And when you have others who believe with you, you become more confident. And when you're more confident, you speak louder, and whoever speaks louder gets heard more. A loop is formed. I once called this the echo chamber amplification effect. You stand in a virtual room where everyone sounds like you, and you assume the majority outside also thinks that way. And when a discordant voice rings out, you don't think, here's another perspective. You think, this person is a spy, a heretic, an agent of the establishment. I was once called a CIA-funded agent trying to sabotage natural nutrition, simply because I said essential oils don't cure cancer. When belief becomes part of identity, any opposition is seen as a personal threat. There's no room for healthy debate, no room for maybe you're right, maybe I'm wrong, no room for ambiguity. And that is the greatest tragedy of this era. Everyone lives as if they are running their own personal nation, where they are the righteous one, the judge, the scientist, the victim, the hero. So how do we break this loop? I don't have a magic spell, but I have a painful truth. Your opinion and mine holds no value if it cannot withstand scrutiny. That scrutiny doesn't come from those who agree with you. It comes from those who dare to ask, do you have evidence? Where did you learn this? Are you willing to admit you're wrong? That's why I don't fear those who oppose me. I fear those who nod to everything I say. Because I know if they nod today, they might turn their backs tomorrow. I only trust those who dare to doubt, even if they doubt me. A colleague once told me a heartbreaking story. He's a researcher in child nutrition, working at a prestigious academic medical institution. One day, he received a barrage of hateful emails after appearing in a YouTube video where he frankly stated there's no solid evidence that nut milk is a better choice than cow's milk for young children. One email read, "You're poisoning parents' minds, you're a murderer." Another sent a photoshopped image of his face next to the word Satan. He laughed as he recounted it, but I saw a cold sadness in his eyes. We're living in an age where you can't speak up if what you say goes against what others want to believe. I used to think that the more information there was, the more rational society would become. But now I realize information doesn't create rationality, attitude does. And the most prevalent attitude today is, I don't need to know what you say, I just need to know you're not like me. A mother once responded to my article about the benefits of vaccines in a very polite tone. She didn't shout or curse, she just wrote, I thank you for what you've shared, but I will not vaccinate my child. Not because I hate science, but because I no longer believe that anyone understands my child better than I do, including you. I read that sentence over and over. It wasn't a rebuttal, not a debate. It was an assertion of the absolute right of personal feeling in evaluating truth. And that is the crux of this illusion. For centuries, humanity strived to create a common ground where we agreed on the criteria for truth. We agreed that experiments needed to be repeatable, that evidence needed scrutiny, that personal feelings needed to be placed under the light of verification. But now, everything seems to flow upstream. A person posting a clip claiming they cured their illness by talking to their cells can spread further than a randomized controlled study with 10,000 samples. Why? Because real person, real story, real emotion. The problem is, real here no longer means true. It just means I believe it. I once interviewed a man who believed eating charcoal every morning helped him detox his brain from media toxins. I asked, do you have any evidence? He looked at me and chuckled. I am the evidence. Just look at me. I looked at him. He seemed fine, nothing indicated danger. But so what? A person looking fine doesn't make their strange behavior rational. But in this era, people don't need rationality. They just need to be seen, to be shared, to be agreed with. And that's what social media platforms understand perfectly. A neutral scientific article with long footnotes and detailed data will be buried. A 15-second clip with a confident voice and stimulating background music will be recommended millions of times. Algorithms don't care about right or wrong, they care about how long you stay engaged. And in that game, certainty always wins. While truth hesitant, timid, humble gets kicked out of the frame. A high school student once asked me after a presentation, if everyone has an opinion, how do I know who's right? I replied, learn to trust those who dare to say they might be wrong. It's not easy, but it's the only way. We need to restore the idea that opinion is not truth, and not everyone with a microphone deserves to be heard. Not because they are inferior, but because truth cannot be distributed evenly like charity meals. Truth needs to be sought, tested, verified, and above all, humbly acknowledged in its complexity. The sad thing is, when I said this at a conference, someone from the back row shouted, listening to you is exhausting. In short, do you have an opinion or not? I smiled. My opinion is that I don't know everything, and that's why I'm still learning. That sentence was never quoted anywhere, never trending, but I kept it for myself. Like an old map in an age where everyone carries a broken compass but shouts loudly, I know the way. A political science professor, known for his sharp and neutral analyses, leaned towards me during a meal and whispered, you know what worries me most? It's not that everyone has opinions, but that no one is willing to live with the consequences of those opinions. That sentence haunted me because it was painfully true. In the modern world, opinions are free, but consequences are not. You can go online, declare that vaccines kill people, then turn off your phone and go to sleep. But if someone believes you, refuses vaccination, and then gets sick, who will be responsible? No one. I once saw a post circulating widely among parent groups. Paracetamol causes severe liver damage in children. Never give it to your child. The post cited no sources, no evidence, but it had thousands of shares with comments like, thank you, just in time to stop my baby from taking medicine tonight. A pediatrician later told me that a child was hospitalized with an unmanageable high fever because the parents didn't want to poison their child. And the person who posted that. No one knows where they are. The online world doesn't require anyone to face the consequences of what they say, and opinions, when there's no price to pay, gradually become irresponsible. I'm not saying everyone should be silent. On the contrary, I believe in discussion, in counterargument, in multiple perspectives. But I also believe that the right to speak does not come with the right to be exempt from verification. If you say something that can influence health behavior, you must be ready for others to question you. If you claim to doubt mainstream science, you must have data, not just belief. If you declare a suppressed cure, you need more than a 45-second TikTok clip with eerie background music. Because if not, you are not sharing truth. You are merely toying with other people's beliefs. I know some will say, so what do you want? Only experts get to speak? No, I want everyone to speak, but also to be taught how to think. I want us to teach our children that not everything that sounds true is asterisk true, that an asterisk feeling of being right doesn't mean it is asterisk right. And Dr. Google cannot replace a real doctor. I want us to teach students that opinion shouldn't be where you stop, it's where you start. Go find the data. Ask experts. Admit when you don't know. And remember, the smartest person isn't the one with the most opinions, but the one who knows when to be silent and learn. I once wrote 2 sentences on a whiteboard in a classroom. I believe this. I am willing to change if there is better evidence. Then I asked, can any of you say both of those sentences at once? They were silent, and then a hand went up. A student, usually quite argumentative, stood up and said, I can say it, but it's not easy. And perhaps that's precisely why it's worth saying. I nodded. That moment, that genuine hesitation, that courage in uncertainty is what I hope you retain. Because ultimately, what I'm fighting against isn't opinion, it's false certainty. I don't fear those who ask, I'm not sure if this is true. I fear those who say, I am certain, and anyone who doesn't believe me is an enemy. We don't need more people shouting their asterisk own asterisk truth. We need more people who are honest about their uncertainty. Because from that uncertainty, we truly begin to learn, and from there, step out of illusion to move towards a deeper, kinder, and more humble understanding. Because knowledge, when repeated without critique, becomes dogma. But knowledge, when placed amidst sincere doubt, can become freedom.